Morning, everybody. I hope we're all digging in the Prestige series. We're going to do 7150 to 7199 right now. And there's some great titles in here. I think sometimes people get this idea that once it goes to the soul jazz movement, that the 7000 series has no relevance, and that's really far from the truth. And if you really want to be honest about it, almost anything Prestige 7150 for the next 5-6 years, if you want to have people enjoy jazz at a party or at an event or at a gathering, or if you want your black friend to come over and be like, oh, this is kind of cool. What is this? This is jazz? I like this. This is the kind of jazz you need to play. All the fun, avant-garde, crazy, bebop, all the stuff that doesn't really groove the same way, it's never going to appeal to the broader mass audience that likes the feel of a solid, repetitious rhythm and blues groove. And soul jazz, again, it's not exclusively even that. There's a lot of other great titles. Two of the Cooking Work Steam Relaxing titles still have to be released. Coltrane's still putting work out on this label. So let's dive in here. There's also 4 titles that I'm missing because they're reissues of earlier work. And I'm going to show you the earlier version. Even though I don't have the later version, I'm just going to show you what it's a release of, a re-release of. And some of these covers that I'm missing are actually kind of cool covers. Like the Monk's Mood is kind of a cool cover, but it's not a record you need if you have the original material. So let's jump into the discography, shall we? Okay, the first one is 7150, Miles Davis and the Modern Jazz Giants. That is a reissue of that. I had an original copy. It disappeared at one of my gigs at one point. It's good early Miles Davis from 54 with Milt Jackson, Monk, Percy Heath, and Kenny Clark. 51 is Blow, Arnett Cobb. Arnett Cobb's a great Texas tenorman with Lockjaw Davis present as well. Soul, barbecue, jazz is what you got here. Texas tenorman, for the most part, those guys are going to give you a real blues, roadhouse, barbecue and beans kind of feel. But it's comfortable, it's familiar, and people who don't even know it, the blues is such a familiar form that you can have anybody kind of dig it. Arnett Cobb sadly also gets some of the worst album covers at Prestige, and that's one of the better ones right there, 7151. 7152 is Creek Bank, Mose Allison. One of the commenters of the day said they saw Mose back in the 70s and said he was great. I have 2 copies of that for some reason. Again, one of those times I was at a store, I didn't have my binders with me, and I was like, man, did I buy this one or did I lose it at auction? I don't know. And you buy it to be safe and come home and like, dang, got it. 7153, this has an alternate cover. This is actually the Prestige Swingsville cover, which came out like the year after its initial release. That's 7153. The 7153 version of this is really expensive. Hal Singer's fantastic player. Charlie Shavers and Ray Bryant. Just kind of tells you what you're getting there. I'm a huge Charlie Shavers fan. I'm a big Ray Bryant fan as well. I love Ray Bryant more as a sideman than I do as a leader. A lot of his leader work tends to veer towards commercial, and his work as a sideman is just filled with the blues and a lot of gospel. 7154 is the fantastic Eddie Davis Lockjaw with Shirley Scott, and they do a number of records together. Stanley Turrentine and Eddie Lockjaw Davis, that's music that you can entertain people with. You know, that type of soul jazz from the mid to late 60s is fantastic. Shirley Scott, Scotty, it's her second or third record here at Prestige, and she does a just an immense body of work. Probably one of the leading women in jazz is Shirley Scott, just in terms of longevity alone. Her amount of work as a leader, very few females got that. A lot of the great female players like Melba Liston and Vi Red and just go on down that list. So few of them, did I say Melba Liston? I meant the trombone player, is that right? Anyway, so many of them didn't get much work as a leader at all. Mary Lou Williams didn't get much work as a leader, but Shirley Scott was just at the right place at the right time to make it happen. 7156 is Coleman Hawkins' Hawkeyes with Charlie Shavers, Tiny Grimes, Ray Bryant, George Duvivier, and O.C. Johnson. So just a great modern jazz session with a great bunch of players playing the blues, playing jazz. That's what jazz looks like. All the composition and avant-gardism and modernity that's coming out around it. This is the heart and soul of jazz. This is the main road that the entire system is paved off of. People should never ignore a record like that, and it's a completely great reason to keep buying the 7,000 sequence. That's a great record. All the Hawkins stuff at Prestige is great. Red Garland, he never goes into any of the other. Oh, he does do some Moodsville stuff for sure, but for the most part, most of his records keep coming out in the 7,000 series, and that's a great reason to keep collecting the 7,000 series. His trio changes a little bit from time to time. Here's with Sam Jones and Art Taylor. I remember Sam Jones did some of these sessions. Fantastic record, great cover. Really captures that New York neighborhood vibe. 7158 is Catton with Coltrane and Kinnechay. I think this one might have an additional cover to it. And it's just a great record. Kinnechay is one of those guys that's kind of forgotten. And he kind of disappears off the scene by the 70s, sadly. Even though he works with Coltrane. And Coltrane certainly kept his name somewhat on people's lips, but he disappeared for the most part. And this is where the first missing record comes in. 7159 is Monk's Moods. It's a reissue of this, 7027, which of course I showed you about 3 videos ago. One of Monk's great pieces, no question about it. But Monk's, by this time, are in 59. Monk's signing with Columbia. He's starting to have a real breakthrough amount of success. And so what's Bob Weinstock's reaction to that? Let's repackage some of Monk's stuff with different covers and try to wring a few more dollars out of what we have in our ownership, you know. Benny Green blows his horn, 7160. I've talked about Benny Green. He's a great rhythm and blues trombone player. A lot of gospel, a lot of soul. He doesn't venture too far into bebop or hard bop. He's going to be more centered and melodic in his phrasing at all times. 7161 is Eddie Lockjaw Davis Cookbook Volume 2. And these cookbook records sold pretty well. They also have multiple covers. One of those things, that's prestige. This is how they do. 7162, Please Mr. Jackson. This is Willis Jackson's debut. If I remember, he's a guy from Miami, Florida. And he's got that kind of cool to him if you look at him. But he moves up north, gets involved in some sessions, and eventually he gets a contract at Prestige. And he makes probably close to a dozen records here that are textbook Prestige mid-60s sounding stuff. It's got rhythm and blues edges to it, which essentially that's what soul jazz is. It's just jazz with rhythm and blues edges and sounds and really straight rhythms that don't make you fall off the beat, you know, accessible. 7163 is Shirley Scott. Scotty plays the Duke. And she makes, like I said, a lot of records, and they come pretty fast and quick. This is a trio with George Duvivier and Arthur Edgehill. And once she departs Prestige, probably in 2 or 3 years here, she'll go to Impulse and make a dozen records there that are also great. But again, you have Bob Thiel, you have a bigger oversight because it's a bigger company, and a lot of those ABC Impulse Shirley Scott records aren't really as free and open just to play the blues. They're more oversight, more Oliver Nelson arrangements behind her. These are simple, stripped down records on Prestige, where the only object here is to make good, honest, simple music. And Impulse always tried to up that ante to some degree. 7164s are pretty rare Prestige record, pretty expensive as well. Enough said by the great Bill Jennings. Huge fan of Bill Jennings. He backs up a lot of Prestige sessions kind of anonymously on that rhythm guitar. And guitar and organ really start coming to the front here at this point. And Bill Jennings is just a great player who a lot of people are going to have forgotten about. And but the collectors know, and that's why his records go for what they do. 7165 was Arnett Cobb, Party Time. Same thing with Arnett Cobb, just a great Texas tenorman. Party Time kind of sums it up, you know. Just a great Lockjaw Davis, Willis Jackson, Arnett Cobb. It's all that same barbecue blues, Ray Bryant, Wendell Marshall, Ray Barretto, and Art Taylor. And when you add Ray Barretto to the mix, it gives it even more of a kind of a cool Latin conga feel, which was, of course, was the objective there. 7166 would be Prestige's third release from Cookin', Workin', Steamin', and Relaxing. A great album cover there, Workin', sorry. Of course, it's the great quintet that was all recorded in those 2 days. And Miles has definitely departed the label by now. We're talking 1960 here, but the stuff was recorded in 56. 7167 is very saxy. A fun play on words here. It's got 4 tenormen: Eddie Lockjaw Davis, the great Buddy Tate, Arnett Cobb, the Texas tenorman, and Coleman Hawkins, the architect of the tenor. So you have 4 of the great saxophone players of any era on this record, trading licks, playing the blues. It's just a hoedown. And then 7168, which follows that up, is again an album I don't have. It's another Monk session, and it turns out to be, actually 7168 is this Miles record. This is 7025, the original cover, and it got repackaged with a different cover called Early Miles. And then 7169 is a repackage of this Monk record with Rollins, and they call it Workin' or Work, Monk and Rollins. And so again, you got 2 guys that have moved on to kind of bigger things here with Monk and Miles and Rollins, and Prestige is still trying to capitalize on the vault recordings that they have of these guys. It's not a stupid play, because I'm sure those records sold okay even in their second format, but it's just something as a collector you need to be wary of. And so you get these gaps in the discography here that, again, Blue Note wouldn't have dreamt of doing this. Blue Note was too focused on, we got a whole bunch of sessions by a whole bunch of young kids here, let's just keep putting out new material. 7170, the great Red Garland at the Prelude. This is a Status pressing, which was a budget label that supposedly used recycled vinyl at some point, and some people say they're noisy and staticky. I think I have 1 or 2 that are a little bit noisy, but for the most part, almost all of my Status records play just fine. And it can make the negotiation for one of these records, if it's a Status pressing, you can half what they're offering oftentimes. This is Garland with Jimmy Rouser on the bass and Specs Wright on the drums. I like Specs Wright a lot. But that Garland record in the original Prestige form would be $100, $200 record with that Status insert there, sticker on there. You can probably negotiate that and say it's a Status pressing. How about I give you $60 for it? And if it sounds like crap, you send it back. But that's not been my experience, honestly. But again, I'm not sitting there with a microphone and a listening device to my ear going, oh my God, what's the inferiority level of this vinyl? It's not how I listen to the music. I'm not listening to the vinyl. I've never listened to the vinyl ever. It's never been something I've done. This is Jaws in Orbit with Shirley Scott once again. Great Lockjaw Davis. I love this cover. Classic jazz look. Good fonts, good colors. Just great soul house, barbecue jazz again. 7172 is Willis Jackson, Keep It On A Blowin'. And with Willis Jackson, like I said, you know what you're going to get. He's got Bill Jennings on the guitar, Jack McDuff on the organ, Milt Hinton's on the bass, Tommy Potter. Excuse me. Great. I love Willis Jackson's records. I think they're fantastic. And the great thing about it is you're going to have those Willis Jacksons for a fraction of the cost. You know, they're Willis Jackson records, Stanley Turrentine records, Lockjaw Davis records, Arnett Cobb records. They never go for the $300, $400. A nice copy might cost you $50, $60, $70, and a more beat-up copy will cost you $20 or $30. Shirley Scott, Soul Searching, 7173. I don't need to describe her work anymore. You got what you get. And again, her stuff at Prestige is going to stay fairly small group and fairly rooted in the blues and just improvising and bringing down that gospel. 7174 is the great brother Jack McDuff. And this might be his first here at Prestige here. And he makes a long string of records for Prestige. Again, the great Bill Jennings shows up on this on the guitar. And he has a lot to offer. 71, 75 is More Party Time. This is again is an okay cover by Arnett Cobb. Arnett ended up having some health issues, and if I remember, he was a cat that in the 80s was playing on crutches, but he was still throwing down, teetering on the brink of collapsing at times, it looked like. But I see him in Europe, and these guys, they play for life. It's not a game. It's not just fun. It's, yeah, you got to make a living. That's part of the process. But these guys do it beyond the grave. It just sticks with them for life. This is the other Bill Jennings record as a leader, Glide On, with Jack McDuff on the organ. And Bill and Jack worked together quite a lot at this point. And I swear, you can't go wrong with any of these records. The idea that they're soul jazz makes people turn away. It's a mistake. If you like Lee Morgan Sidewinder, you're going to love any of these records. These are accessible, fun records. This is a weird album cover, if you ask me. 71, 78, Eddie Lockjaw Davis with Shirley Scott. Plays the congas and the bongos. That she doesn't play them, but they're added in. Bacalhau. Isn't that Portuguese fish dish, if I remember? So it's got a bit of a lighter feel. Again, the cover doesn't even look like a Prestige album cover from this era. 70, 70, 79, 71, 79. This is actually a James Moody record, a reissue of 70, 72, which is one of those earlier ones I've already shown you. So in this case, I actually have both. So I figured I'd show you that. 70, 70, 71, 80, sorry. Boss tenor, Gene Ammons. This is probably right before he goes back to prison for quite a long time. And Gene Ammons is right in that mix with all the other guys I was just talking about. So there's quite a few great saxophone players at Prestige at this point. And as I've mentioned in other episodes before, trumpet is really starting to take a back seat in jazz. The organ's coming to the front. The guitar is becoming more prominent. The saxophone is really the big symbol of jazz at this point. The trumpet, there's not a lot of great trumpet players coming on the scene once you pass over into 1960. A lot of great guys are coming up in the 40s, into the 50s. You even got guys like, Hubbard and, just Woody Shaw showing up late in the 50s, early 60s. But the amount of trumpet players that are showing up on the scene here is very minimal. And Prestige, for the most part, aside from reissuing some Miles Davis stuff, there's not a lot of trumpet here in this section at all. And a lot of the trumpet players, too, like Don Cherry, seem to go quite avant-garde with it. And Prestige didn't have much time for none of that. Red Garland, Soul Junction. This is a great record. This is one of those quintet Garland records. And because Bird and Coltrane are on there, it's going to really ramp up its cost. It was recorded in 57, because obviously Coltrane's been departed for a while. So it actually took Prestige a couple of years to put that material out, which is interesting. Good stuff. Great stuff, honestly. But it's very different than Red Garland's trio stuff. You have to be clear on that. 7182, more Shirley Scott, classic Blue Note style album cover, Reed Miles Impact, Mucho Mucho, with the Latin Jazz Quintet. So she's playing kind of a more Latin-infused sound on that one. But again, you got to give it up to Shirley Scott. She's a bad bitch. She just hangs in there, regardless of, the gender issue, the race issue. She must be a tough as nails chick to stick around in this man's-driven business for as long as she did. 7183 is Blue Gator. Of course, Gator was the nickname of Willis Jackson, being a Floridian as he was. And Gator was a nickname he earned fairly early on. And so that's Gator kind of playing the blues, which is what Gator does. Smooth Sailing, Arnett Cobb. Not one of my favorite album covers. 7184. Again, Cobb, same kind of thing going on here. Tough McDuff. Jack McDuff with Jimmy Forrest. Jimmy Forrest is a great player. Again, a saxophone player with all kinds of blues and bluster and soul. And Forrest probably has a little bit more edge and ferocity than a lot of the soul jazz cats do. But he still has a lot of rhythm and blues in his sound because it's inescapable. If you're a black player especially, the rhythm and blues is so part of your DNA. Again, the black players in organ jazz and soul jazz, it's all kind of synonymous with the black community and the black culture. And you don't get a whole great deal of white cats delving into soul jazz. The white cats were trying to be composers and arrangers and be noticed and stick out, and ego-driven composition kind of thing. Etta Jones, this is her appearance here at the label, first one, I think 7186. Don't go to strangers. She was married to one of these fellows here at the label. Frank West is on this. Skeeter Best is on this on the guitar. George DeVivier, Roy Haynes on the drums. I don't think she was married to Frank West. She's married to one of the pretty big sax players here. I can't remember who it is. I'll have to look that up when I'm done here. 7187, Betty Roche. Just a great singer. Just all the soul and gospel and feel of a black lady singing and swinging. She was initially the gal who was behind Ellington's Take the A Train, and she performed it with the band some in 1940 in that era, and then the recording band comes into place, and so she never got to be on the recording of Take the A Train because it wasn't recorded for a couple years. But then Ellington re-records it on the Uptown record in like 54 or so, 53, and he does actually get her on that version. So there's multiple versions of A Train out there. She makes a record at Bethlehem that's also fantastic called To Take the A Train. Lush Life, 7188. This is Coltrane, but it's recorded in 57. It doesn't get issued till 1961. He's playing with some fun players on this. You have Earl May on the bass, Art Taylor on the drums, and then on side 2 you have Donald Byrd, Red Garland, Paul Chambers, Lewis Hayes, and Al Heath. I love Coltrane playing Lush Life. Of course, it's a great song by Billy Strayhorn, Ellington's right-hand man. And so even Coltrane, for all his dynamics and bluster, he wasn't above dipping into the Ellington catalog anytime that was necessary. 7189 is more Mose Allison, Autumn Song. Interesting cover. It's quite a modern-looking cover. And Mose plays with fairly anonymous players for the most part. Ronnie Free on the drums. And he does have Addison Farmer here on the bass, Art Farmer's twin brother, who dies tragically quite young. 7190 is Southside Soul, the John Wright Trio. And he's a Chicago institution. I love John Wright. He plays with a lot of creativity and a lot of emotion and sincerity and integrity. He has a Coltrane look to him, even just that sincerity and that fierce fire burning inside of him that's not really playing any games here at all. The tenor scene, 7191. Griffin, Lockjaw Davis. Griffin and Lockjaw do a series of records together at Prestige, and some of them are on Riverside. Griffin was a Riverside guy, Lockjaw was a Prestige guy. And Griffin's a little small, little giant. Griffin's a bit of a bigger guy. They're both kind of debonair ladies' men. Griffin can play 1,000,000 miles an hour, very technical, very proficient, very precise. Lockjaw doesn't read music. He's very smooth and bluesy and soulful. It actually makes them fairly easy to tell apart most of the time. But it creates an interesting dynamic between the two, and it's not a competition. It's more of a, you inspire me to say this back kind of thing. I'm sure there was some competition at times because they do a lot of records together, but it always seems like a fun give and take, and like they had a great kinship. And that's an original pressing. I had kind of a deluxe reissue of this for a while, and then I found the original pressing for a good price, and I grabbed it. Gene Ammons Jug. This was 7192. Of course, that was his nickname for a long time, and I'm pretty sure Ammons is in jail by the time that comes out. Yet another record I have 2 copies of by mistake. Silly Me. Rojo, Red Garland Trio. Fantastic Red Garland. I love the little Red Garland. He's such a fun player with George Joyner on the bass and the great Charlie Persip on the drums. You don't see him at Prestige a lot. He has a great record at Bethlehem, Charlie Persip, but he goes back into the swing era. Something Nice, Etta Jones. Again, they're starting to use white more here with that Lockjaw record and this record, 7194. She's a great little singer. You know, she fills that niche for Prestige. Shirley Scott, 7195. So again, you see she has a lot of work here. 7196 is the great Willis Jackson. Once again, a great album cover, Great colors and font. I think Reed Miles would have been proud of that one. It looks like something that Reed would have done in the Blue Note 1500 sequence. That's a cover of this I bought, John Wright's Trio, Nice and Tasty. And I didn't realize when I bought it that it didn't have the cover, which explained why I got it for such a good price. So I basically had to rebuy it again, Nice and Tasty, $71.97. So you see there's quite a few Prestige here. I actually have two of, never that much intentionally, but it just happens. Betty Roche, this is her second record at Prestige and her last, $71.98, Lightly and Politely. Beautiful cover, great singer. You just hear the church in her every time she picks up that microphone. She's got more church in her than Etta James does. Etta Jones. Etta's more of a bar room blues singer, and Betty's more of a gospel-inflected blues tinged singer. There's a different feel to both. 71.99 is Jack McDuff, the Honey Dripper, which became one of his nicknames. He had several. Another cool cover right there. And I guess I missed this one apparently. This is 71.76, which was a reissue of this 71.10. So this is the original 71.10 here. I don't have the 71.6. I figured I'd still show it to you. So that shows you the entire 7100 sequence. So again, I urge people, when you're out shopping and you're in your record stores and you see this Prestige stuff that's 71.50 and up, it's rarely going to break the bank. And I say this with all the sincerity in the world. Most of you would end up listening to these records longer for the rest of your life than you will the more experimental stuff. The experimental stuff might cost more, might seem more trendy, might be more fun to post on the Facebook groups. Everyone can comment, be like, oh my God, you found that. Great. But it's these more accessible, fun records that will stay with you for life and always have a place that they feel important. They're comfortable. Your wife won't mind them. Your company won't mind them. And I hate to be in a place where I feel like I got to play music that no one else is appreciating. As a DJ, I just can't really go down that road very often. I'm like, oh, I'm being self-indulgent. And if I want to be self-indulgent, I should do that in my own time. If I want to have my friends over and make them have a good time, I need to play music that's going to make them feel comfortable. And so don't pass up these records if you see them for under $20. The Etta Jones, the Shirley Scott, some of those records are going to, like the Betty Roche records are pretty expensive. The Bill Jennings records are pretty expensive. But if you see a Bill Jennings record and it's $40, you better buy that. The Arnett Cobbs, all those great tenormen I was talking about, any one of those records, you buy that for under $20, under $30. They're great covers, they're great music. It teaches you the canon, and honestly, you'll only appreciate the more avant-garde stuff and out stuff and complicated stuff more if you know the songbook and if you know how the songs sound in a more standard setting. The more familiar you are with all this music and the American Songbook and all the melodies, the more interesting what Parker's doing with the melodies can be. If you don't really know the body of work that's behind what Parker's doing, Parker's innovation is really lost on you. But when you know the melody of a song and you want to hum along to it, and you hear how Parker is departing from that melody so dramatically, it increases your understanding and comprehension of what Parker was doing. If you want to appreciate Ornette Coleman in his Free, it's knowing the melodic structure and foundation of this music that allows all those developments and all those departures from the norm to have bearing and make sense. Without the center of the road being well paved, all the offshoots don't have the same value. It's once you've determined and understood what the main middle of the road sounds and looks like and feels like, and not just in one era, because what happens in 55 is very different than what's happening in 62. So you have to have the main body of work, at least a good chunk of it, to really appreciate what that branch right there was about and what influenced it and why they went out there. And I find myself, I appreciate Coltrane and Rollins and a lot of Monk. So much of that interesting stuff has more impact and understanding and comprehension to me now that I've broadened my horizons and know the musical canon so much better than I did when I was buying Coltrane. When I was buying Coltrane, I thought this was the road. And what you come to realize down the road is that, man, this was a fairly great departure from the road. And even Love Supreme is a fairly intense edges of the avant-garde piece that's, drenched in spirituality and composition and has a really intent quartet playing it, but it's by no means the middle of the road jazz-wise. And there's a lot of people who don't really enjoy a Love Supreme. I've posted it in the Facebook groups, and you get, the most people saying, oh, I love one of the greatest records ever, kind of thing. But there's certainly a numerous amount of people that say, I never really got this record. I never really liked that record. And I appreciate that honesty. To me, one of the toughest things to do is to say, I don't really get a record that is universally acclaimed by the masses. That takes a little bit of individuality. It takes a little bit of, in some level, you're being more of an individual saying, I don't really like that stuff, even though it makes sense that you don't. It makes more sense than the people who are all clamoring to buy it, and because they've been told they have to have it, then it's so important, who are forcing themselves to say, well, I love this, it's great. And not everybody is in that camp. Some people really do love edgy music all the time. But that's a small, small minority. And a lot of jazz fans are very misled into thinking and feeling they have to own music that's uncomfortable to them. And they're almost been taught to ignore the accessible, fun side of the music because it's not cool enough for a lot of the people who are out there commenting and posting about jazz. They want to show you this $500 record they got from Belgium that's so rare that nobody bought at the time. They want to show you those real rare pieces and extreme examples because they think that's where the notoriety and the praise comes from. But in some ways, that's insecurity driving that as a collector. Be able to admit what you like and what you don't like and be honest with yourself. I think jazz would stick with so many more people if they were willing to say, I like this middle of the road stuff a lot, but everyone kind of ridicules me for it when I post it, and it's kind of driving me away from being a part of that community. And I feel there's a lot of that in the jazz Facebook groups especially. And no one likes any kind of snob, a line snob, a vocabulary snob, coffee snob. If you like intricate, delicate, fancy, that's awesome. But don't cast aside the main body of work in any of those things because you're becoming aloof and Anyway, I'm going to leave it at that. Soul jazz is worth having. Just put that down, write it in pen on your forehead. Buy soul jazz when I see it because you will digest it. It's one of those meals that you can eat twice a week versus one of those meals that you can eat once every 6 months. And there's a lot of guys with collections of jazz records that are all meals I can eat once every 6 months. They don't have a lot of the staples that you need to eat every day. Soul jazz is that. It's daily consumption food. And it will speak to your soul. It doesn't have to have honking and screeching and discomfort for it to be edifying. It can still build you up. The blues is an accessible format. And to me, there's nothing more free than a guy blowing on the blues because he's not thinking about where the song's going and the chord changes. He's just like, oh yeah, fuck, I can just relax and speak from my soul and my heart via the vehicle of improvisation that's speaking about my emotional state in this world. Emoting via improvisation. That's jazz. The essence of jazz, that's what it is. And the more complex an arrangement gets, the more chord changes and funny choreographed composition that happens, the less freedom exists. The less I can just play from my soul, and the more I got to use my mind to engage in that music. And the mind is rigid. The mind isn't free. The mind is fettered. The mind isn't nearly as free as my soul. The mind's stuck here in the present in this world. My soul is eternal and speaks of all time that's ever been. And for the most part, I would rather listen to most musicians' soul speak than their minds. And that's where my feeling comes from. Once I started to understand the magnitude and the value of improvising emoting via improvisation. Once I got that, and I heard that locomotion where Morgan comes in and just spits that fury on Coltrane's Blue Train, and that aha moment, it clicks. I'm like, oh shit, he can improvise how he feels right now and express his anger and his disappointment and his tension and his fear. And like, it sounded like he got splashed by a puddle before he came in the studio that day. Morgan just sounds furious when he comes in on that track, just eviscerates his trumpet. And the entire landscape of jazz changed for me at that moment. That honest expression and conversation with my soul into my instrument, hoping that you have enough empathy to comprehend what I'm saying. Can you understand my experience? You know, my personality, you know, the environment I live in. All those things will help color who I am and what I'm saying and why I'm saying it. And if you don't understand the art, you really aren't hearing it or feeling it. So history is important. I mean, all the history we talk in this channel, it's important to get it. The openness of the blues is important because it's an integral way to grasp the music. And once again, I said I'm done. I'm going to wrap it up, and I want another 5 minutes. That's what I do. Sometimes once you get into a flow, you just got to let it go. But we are going to wrap it up here. Please subscribe to the channel if you haven't. Hit that like button. If you want to support the channel, go to Patreon. Donate $5 a month. Help us out. Let me keep this channel going. I'd hate to have to get a 9-to-5 job, which DJ work will come back. I believe that. I just got to wear this thing out through COVID and the restaurant scene coming back online. A lot of restaurants are tough right now in the money department. So they don't have a bunch of money to throw at a DJ for entertainment on the weekend. So I'm just kind of waiting it out, hoping I can, survive through this lull and find my niche once again. But there's also some great merchandise in the merch store that covers a lot of different eras of the channel. Take a look through that stuff if you want to buy a t-shirt or a hoodie. Appreciate you all. Some great comments and feedback the last few weeks. I've been enjoying interacting with everybody. I try to respond to every comment I can. If it's just a good job or something like that, I maybe want a thumbs up or something. But I do try to interact with my people as much as possible. You guys are part of a big reason why I do it. I'm not just speaking to myself. I already kind of understand a lot of what I'm saying. I'm teaching myself sometimes. Sometimes I'm speaking out loud going, man, that makes sense. Kind of learning as I go. But there you go. We're done. Talk to you soon. Be good. Stay safe. Stay warm. Peace.